A Time for Apology, A Brief History of Japanese War Responsibility.
Prisoner extermination was keeping pace. At the Bataan Death March, the Siam-Burma Death Railway, Palawan, and prisons like Outram Road, Cabanatuan, Changi, and Palembang. Nor were civilian populations spared. Over 6 million Chinese died in a hidden Holocaust. As at Nuremberg in Germany with Hitler's Nazis, justice would be meted out to the accused murderers in a world trial. From 1946 to 1949, jurists from 11 aggrieved nations would try over 5,700 defendants. But the difficulties would be more daunting politically and judicially than in the far better known trials at Nuremberg. The justice was real and widespread. However, if individuals submitted to justice, Japan, the nation, declined to do so.
Overall, any sort of a reasonable observer would have to say that Japan has been in denial of the outrageous feats, the atrocities that Japanese performed during World War II.
The world is a very dark and grim place. More often than not, humans are directly the cause for much of this darkness. That is why it is important for us as humans to learn from our mistakes. But in order for us to fully learn from our mistakes, we must admit we have made a mistake. In America, we all know of the antagonistic role Germany played in Europe. But how many people know of the millions that died in Asia at the hands of the Japanese Empire? We hardly know anything about it, and racism aside, there is a large reason why we don't learn about the atrocities Japan committed. Japan has almost successfully abandoned and ignored its history of war crimes and colonialism, but as the generations continue, it is still apparent that Japan needs to formally apologize and admit responsibility. Japan has erased its own history in order to avoid responsibility, as can be seen with the cover up of Unit 731, the lack of war education in Japan, and their interference with comfort women memorials. The time is ticking. It is time for Japan to face up to its actions and apologize. Inspired by Western countries and fueled by the fear of becoming like China, who has succumbed to Britain during the Opium War, Japan made a promise to industrialize and build their own empire. Japan began building its empire in 1869, and by the 19th century, they had territories in what is now modern day Sakhalin, Russia, Taiwan, Hokkaido, and Okinawa. In 1910, Japan annexed Korea. Japan later gained the puppet state of Manchukuo, which is modern day Manchuria, in 1932. A few years later, the Japanese Empire would join World War II as a part of the Axis powers with Germany and Italy. This subsequently began the Pacific War, or the theater of World War II that occurred in Asia and the Pacific. From 1941 to 1945, Japan gained numerous territories in what is now modern day Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Cambodia, Laos, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Myanmar, New Guinea, Guam, East Timor, and Nauru. The Japanese Empire fought over control of Southeast Asia, often treating civilians and prisoners of war extremely inhumanely. The Japanese army had no qualms in killing civilians, raiding hospitals, and breaking international war laws. During this time, Japan committed numerous war atrocities. Japan has largely yet to apologize and take accountability for these crimes. The denials, Nanjing, and comfort women. Now, Japanese government officials, professionals, and common people alike have all denied their crimes. I would like to focus on the denial of the Nanjing massacre and the comfort women in particular. However, these two atrocities are not the only ones Japan has denied. The Nanjing Massacre was a month long massacre of killing, raping, and destroying the city of Nanjing, China during the Second Sino Japanese War. Comfort women are the various women from Japanese territories that were deceived or straight up kidnapped and forced into sexual slavery. Listed are some of the reasons why some Japanese claim these events did not happen. Now, it should be noted that only Japanese people have made such claims, or at least done so publicly. The rest of the world tends to universally agree that both of these atrocities happened and happened at a large scale. It is estimated that there were 200,000 people killed during the Nanjing massacre, with 20,000 to 80,000 women and children raped. Most of the people also universally agree that comfort women were not paid prostitutes and were in fact sex slaves. There's no evidence to back up that these women had contracts with brothel owners, nor that they were paid. There are also numerous survivors' testimonies and photographs as well. Cover ups and textbooks, Unit 731, Education and Statues. Unit 731 was a chemical and biological warfare research unit located in Harbin, China. It was here that about 500,000 prisoners of war as well as civilians lost their lives while having live human experiments performed on them. Japan signed the 1925 Geneva Protocol at the Geneva Convention, which prohibits the use of chemical and biological weapons in war. Unit 731 is a direct violation of the Geneva Protocol and also shows the cruelty of the Japanese researchers who performed these experiments. During the Tokyo trials, many of these researchers were not punished for their crimes as they sold their research information to the United States of America in order for immunity. These researchers who performed disturbing experiments, even on innocent infants and toddlers, were able to live fulfilling lives and have families after committing such awful crimes. Education. Following is a video made by a popular Japanese YouTuber called the Japan Reporter.
Seeing Koreans or Chinese still angry to Japan, we just perceive it like 何の理由もなく俺らのこと嫌ってんだろうな. I'm sorry if that bothered you so much in Japan, but I think it comes down to the fact school don't teach us enough. I know not all the school in Japan teach history exactly the same way and same amount. So keep in mind that this is only my experience. So this was a total amount in my school, which probably wouldn't be enough, and like I said, I didn't remember anything after the test. According to my Korean friends, this is extremely unbelievable and shocking. Because in their school, they said they have a thick textbook that entirely dedicated to talk about the Japanese war crimes, like all the murders and rapes. So there's a huge gap about history education in Japan and Korea. And that's why this is so difficult to resolve, and still a big issue even today.
During 1993, during the Kono Statement, Japan for the first time admitted to having committed war crimes and promised to educate their population by including information on war responsibility in their textbooks. However, this proclamation received much anger from both average civilians and Japanese government officials alike. Numerous derogatory comments were made by Japanese people, such as when Sakamoto Takao, a university professor, very publicly stated that there was no sense in the history of toilets, referring to comfort women as toilets. By 1997, there was no mention of war crimes committed by Japan and Japanese textbooks.
第二次世界大戦が終わったのは何年かご存知ですか
1963年らへん
1920年ぐらい
1945年
あ、ご存知ですねどういうふうにして始まったかはご存知ですか
あまりは覚えてないです
Removal of memorials. Numerous statues and memorials have been erected around the world to remember the victims of the comfort system. However, the Japanese government has either worked with the respective country's government to take the statue down or attempted to. Following is a news report discussing one such instance.
While Abe is in Washington, a questionable chapter in Japan's history is raising eyebrows in a small town in New Jersey. The town of Palisades Park is paying tribute to Japan's comfort women, a term which refers to women serving as sexual slaves during World War II. CCTV correspondent Nathan King has our story.
Palisades Park, New Jersey, the first town in the US to have a majority ethnic Korean population, and the first in the world to have a permanent memorial remembering the plight of hundreds of thousands of so-called comfort women forced by the Imperial Japanese Army into sexual slavery during World War II. The memorials have not escaped the attention of Japanese politicians. Through this email, members of Japan's national legislature, called the Diet, reached out to the mayor of Palisades Park, asking for a meeting. At that meeting, the mayor said they questioned the historical accuracy of the memorial and asked him to remove it. The mayor said this is not an anti-Japanese memorial.
We didn't say anything about the Japanese people. We said this happened during the wartime. This happened to 200,000 Asian women that we know of. We didn't say, anything more about the government or the people of Japan.
We asked for a comment from the Japanese consulate here, but none was forthcoming.
Following is another example of Japan interfering with the erection of comfort women statues.
It's the biggest human sex trafficking crime recorded in modern history. As many as 400,000 young women and girls forced into sexual slavery for the Japanese military. Young Soo Lee is one of the estimated 70 comfort women still alive today.
Those grandmas who passed away before, who are in heaven, they are all watching us, and they are very, very happy.
The 89-year-old flew in from South Korea to help unveil the statue at St. Mary's Square in San Francisco. 3 girls, Chinese, Korean, and Filipino, represent the young girls captured and forced to become sex slaves for Japanese soldiers. The grandmother on the ground represents a former comfort woman who's seeking justice.
The crime will remain. It's not going to go away, no matter how hard they try to erase or try to make us forget.
Like many other girls, Lee says she was kidnapped from her South Korean home when she was just 16. She says she was beaten, tortured, and raped. She says she was forced to serve about 5 soldiers a day.
It wants to whitewash the history. It wants to cleanse history.
Supporters of the statue say the Japanese government tried to stop them from putting it in San Francisco. Today, the Consul General of Japan in San Francisco released a statement criticizing the statue. He says it's a one-sided interpretation of history without presenting credible evidence. Ms. Lee has a choice word for the Consul General.
What kind of bullshit is that?
Mr. Consul General, you are wrong and you're lying.
The fact that Japan is still trying to intervene with the memorials, simply commemorating victims, shows a lack of accountability. The government hides their past crimes. There are Holocaust memorials and a Holocaust museum located in Germany, and yet the Japanese government will not even let other countries put up memorials to commemorate their own citizens. Many survivors of the Pacific War and Japanese colonialism are still alive today. My own grandparents were born in the Empire of Japan in Chosun, or modern-day Korea. They frequently tell their stories of humiliation because of the Japanese and still harbor a great resentment because of the traumas in their childhood. There are so many others like my grandparents who were traumatized by the colonization and war atrocities committed by Japan. And the survivors' children, who grew up in poverty with parents suffering deep mental and physical wounds. Mental health professionals have determined that generational traumas can be passed down for as many as 7 generations. Even I notice habits that I have, that I inherited from my mother, that she inherited from her mother. These crimes committed by Japan are still felt today. While it is the most important to apologize directly to survivors and victims, issuing an apology is also apologizing to entire countries and diasporas. The time is running out for Japan to apologize to the survivors of the war. There are less than 10 surviving registered comfort women still praying for an apology. There are a million more survivors of war, silent in their stories but wishing for closure. Japan, it is not too late. Please apologize.